understanding what the trajectory, what the contours of the future look like are in your hands. You have the contours of the future in your hands. The choices that we made 30, 40, 50 years ago, when our rivers were on fire, when our lakes were inaccessible, when we couldn't eat the fish, when we couldn't enjoy the relationship with the water, when our cities had their backs to the water, were choices people made 40 and 50 years ago. They didn't understand, and they knew at the time that that wasn't going to be a 5-minute, 10-minute, 2-hour, 2-week, 2 months, 2 years effort, but that's taken us 30, 40, and 50 years to get to this point. On my way over here today, as I was walking down the waterfront, a beautiful piece of a restoration of a city's relationship with its great natural resource asset, its river, I watched a man fish, and I saw him actually catch a fish. Sometimes you see people fishing and not always catching. He caught a fish, and that was either breakfast or lunch or dinner. And I thought that was a beautiful thing, because 40 or 50 years ago, we would not have seen that, and if we had, we would have been worried about that. This river has changed a lot, but it changed because people didn't accept what they were handed. Our parents didn't accept what was handed to them from before and said, we're going to start the efforts, and that was not easy work. You can imagine that wasn't easy work. And it wasn't all simple, and it wasn't all linear, and it wasn't all smooth, and it wasn't without fights, and it wasn't without going backwards at times and then going forwards. There are times when you may not feel you're winning. How many of you feel that? Right? That every day you're not necessarily moving ahead in that fashion that you wanted to when you woke up. But I want to keep putting yourself to that world that says what you were handed is not yet good enough, that we need to replumb this system. That's not just with more pipes and pumps, but that's replumbing it with the kind of care and thinking that we know now drives ecological integrity, drives community, drives social cohesion. These are the transformational elements that we think things like green infrastructure bring us. It's not just about water and moving water and saving a few dollars here and there. It's about transforming communities and people and understanding the context of which we manage water and how that plays out over time. That's the palette that we have. That's the contour of the future that we continue to get. The riverfront isn't only a good place to play, but it's a place where community gathers. It changes the heart. This park is a reflection of the heart of a community. We call it green infrastructure, but it's really about this contour. When you were a child, I'm going to ask a couple of quick questions. When you were a child, who believed in you that you could change the world? When you were in high school, who encouraged you to do important things? And as an adult, as you get up every day and go to work, in your first job, when you were first hired, full of eagerness and passion and inspiration and hope, who believed and said, you can change the world? I want to tell you that every day you do that, you can. I believe in you that you can change the way that we do things. That doesn't happen in a minute, that doesn't happen in an hour, that doesn't happen in a day, that happens in a decade. And that happens on winning every piece that you can win. That changes when you work with a client and you help a client understand how to think about the world a little bit different than they had thought about it previously. That happens when you get to make decisions, whether you're on the city council or you're on the board and you help your organization understand how to change the way it thinks about something like managing water off of their parking lot. That doesn't feel like transformation, right? One at a time. But the Great Lakes are in a better shape because we thought this way. And people before us thought this way. And philanthropies thought this way. And cities thought this way. And we all engaged in the hard work of transformation. Green isn't about infrastructure. In fact, I hate that word. I'll tell you why in a minute. Green infrastructure is about rethinking the way that we manage water on the landscape. And the way we manage water on the landscape drives 4 things. It drives ecological integrity. how the system functions, the health of the system. That man can fish and eat a fish knowing it's safer than it was before. It drives economic prosperity. We hear the economic values and gains of the kinds of transformational work that we do, and I can give you some examples of that. But it also drives social transformation. It drives how we think about ourselves differently in relationship to the environment in which we operate. A river trail does that, right? City, those are the transformational elements. It's human and experiential, and it drives culture. We are the Great Lakes people. We have to act like the Great Lakes people. And we do that a parking lot at a time. We do that a roof at a time. We do that a driveway at a time. We do that a park at a time. That may not feel big and transformational, but I guarantee you in 30 years, in 40 years, when that river is even better than it is, and the Great Lakes are even better than they are, people will look back and say, how did they do that? Where did that come from? Who had the drive and the desire to be the change and be the transformational person or entity or element that did that? So I believe that you can do that. And I hope you were encouraged in your life. But if you haven't been, I'm encouraging you now. Every day I want you to get up and be that person that drives that change forward. We can no longer take this for granted. We're going to have to fight our way through the financing, the funding, the policies. There are actors in this room that have been working their whole career on helping set the transformational stage for the work that we do. Whether that's not changing, but reshaping the contours of the Bolt decision, the Supreme Court order in Michigan that makes it a little bit difficult to set up regional stormwater infrastructure, stormwater districts. But that work has to happen, so that policy work. And it has to happen on the economic side. We have to invent mechanisms which we unleash private equity. Is there enough philanthropic money in this state or in this region to do this kinds of transformational work? We'd like to think so, but there's not. Is there enough federal and state money in the system to do the kinds of transformational work that we want? Despite how much money there is in those sectors, there will always be more money in the private sector. So how do we unleash private equity in the work that we're doing, work that Sanjeev and his colleagues are doing, private equity and private investments, work that we're trying to do through the Conference of Great Lakes and St. Lawrence Governors and Premiers to develop a private equity offering that will be the agent of bringing that equity into this space and other spaces that really help accelerate this. This is not the sole purview of governments to do, but it's also the private sector that really has to step into this conversation. Let me give you just a couple quick examples of how we're experimenting. I wanted to bring a little context to this and say, here are just a couple of examples or projects around the basin in the Great Lakes that really just shape what we're talking about. So some work at and Tim Eters here, Great Lakes, the Executive Director of the Commission. The Commission's been engaged in green infrastructure, stormwater management issues for a long time, and this is 8 states, 2 provinces. It's a region with an economic capacity of about $5.7 trillion. It's the 3rd largest economic region in the world, if you want to look at it as a region compared to the governments of Germany and Japan. This is a big region that should be able to manage itself in some ways, right? But the Commission's really undertaking some work on green infrastructure, whether that's nutrient trading, right? That's the green infrastructure projects that they have and some teams that we have working together to try to implement some additional of these methods in and around the region. And I commend you to take a look at some of the work that they're doing. Whether I mention it's the work that Sanjeev is doing on bringing private equity and private investment into this space and transformational. Whether it's, I mentioned nutrient trading, whether it's work that Nature Conservancy is doing around the region in Indiana and some of our other Great Lakes states on green infrastructure. Think about it in the rural environment. How are we replumbing the rural environment with its effects on Western Lake Erie Basin and phosphorus? It's not just about the urban environment, but it's really thinking about how we replumb the whole system, not just the urban portion of that system. So there's a number of examples. It's project, but at the end of the day, it's also the projects. You saw a couple of projects here in Detroit, and in Lansing, some of the streetscaping. If you don't know what this looks like, go take a look down Woodward Avenue, just around the corner, and at the Q line, and the way that green infrastructure was incorporated into this city as an example of that. So we're working at the bigger scale, but we're also working very much at the local scale. One other thing I'll mention around this space is innovations in technology. Show of hands, have we invented all the technologies we need in this arena? Heck no, I heard. All right. The answer is no. So what are we doing to build an ecosystem of innovation in water and water technology? How many of you are aware of the Erie Hack event that was just held in Cleveland? It actually came to Detroit. I see a couple of hands. I would pay very close attention to these hack and hackathons and prize events and efforts. These are really wonderfully transformational. What we build is an ecosystem around transformation. It's not just the decision you make or your clients make or your city makes or the state makes, but it's how do we build an ecosystem around, where does innovation come from? Where do new technologies and new ideas come from? These were teams from around the basin. 2 of the teams, of the top 4 teams that won cash prizes through this event, sponsored through the Cleveland Water Hub, through the Cleveland Water Alliance. Thank you. Thank you, Cleveland Water Alliance. 2 of the teams were from Detroit, in Detroit area. One of them we've actually asked into our office to help us understand the contours of water conservation. So we want to really see what they can offer us relative to the state's water strategy on conservation. This is where new ideas and innovation come from. This is where we can unleash private capital and venture capital and equity as we build an ecosystem around innovation. I just spent last weekend in Montreal, and we got to meet with a foundation there, De Gaspé-Beaubien Foundation, who have been sponsoring these water hack events around the basin. They're going to be in Ontario coming up, and in, I think, Lake Erie next year. So you're going to see more and more of this culture of innovation. It's not just around the things that we know and deployed, but it's also around creating opportunities for entrepreneurialism, innovation, and who's the next billion-dollar company? Could that be in water and water management? We think there's some great opportunities in this that we really build forward. In the few minutes that I have remaining, I'm going to tell you my 4 gripes that I have with green infrastructure. All right? They're not bad gripes. They're more challenges for you. And I have them written down, so I won't miss any of them. So there are 4 things that I have a little bit of a struggle with green infrastructure. One is the name. And I think you heard that in the previous conversation. Why are we talking about this as infrastructure? Let me give you 5 things. Police, fire, libraries, schools, and parks. And I'm going to put a bond fund nationally. Which one of those 5 areas passed local bond funds with more durability at over 70% of the time? Local people putting fees or taxes on themselves. Which one of those 5 pass more frequently than all the rest of them do? Parks. Local acceptance of parks pass at over 70% of the time. But when we come to drinking water, when it comes to water, we go kind of back to our engineering roots and start infrastructure again. Infrastructure doesn't sell at that rate. Parks do. You saw the experience of green infrastructure in this beautiful park. What we don't understand is how, as engineers, to think about this as human experience. Green infrastructure isn't only about the infrastructure side, it's really about the human experiential side of it. But we still try to think about this as infrastructure. We've sort of taken the gray infrastructure model, slapped the word green on it, and said, here, this is better. Green infrastructure, number 2, is not always cheaper. Right? I've had this long conversation. Sanjeev and I had a long dialogue a while ago on email about, well, is it cheaper? Is it less? What's the value of green infrastructure in this equation? We can't sell it only as cheaper. It may be in some cases. It may be more expensive in other cases, which tells us there's something better about it. So the third element of this is, have we done our math? Have we actually done the math? How many of you believe green infrastructure is a good thing? I want to know the one person that doesn't put up their hand. Right? We'll have an intervention later, right? Now tell me why. Make the case. Do the math. Do you believe green infrastructure is an economic choice, a social choice, a cultural choice, and an ecological choice? Have we done the homework as a community enough to understand the social transformational value of the things that we know to be good? How many of you know green infrastructure to be good? I do. Where's the homework that says we understand how this is good or gooder or better than the way we've done things in the past? How is replumbing the system a better way? I don't think we've really challenged ourselves enough to do the homework to show why these are transformational investments. It's not just about a gallon moving here or there or infiltrating water into the groundwater systems, which we need to do as we rely more and more on groundwater. But it's understanding how these become transformational. You may have noticed that the Office of the Great Lakes just put out a small RFP to start to really look at projects that had transformational value and try to understand how do we capture the social and cultural dynamics of should we be measuring? What should we be understanding about community transformation that these types of investments can facilitate? They may be more expensive, they may be less. They're part of human experience, and we don't know how to connect the dots there, and that's a shame. We have to do better. We have to do better. We believe selling it as infrastructure is not the best idea. That doesn't seem to be what captures the public's mind. If parks sell at 70% in their community, then how do we make this more like a park? I'm not saying that every green infrastructure project is a park. Don't get me wrong. But how do we make it more like that if that has human resonance? If I tell you I have a brand new product, I'm an entrepreneur, and I have a brand new product, and 98% of the public wants it, but I just can't make the sale to them, but I really want you to invest in me. How many of you are with me? I only have 2. That's not enough investors. If I tell you 98% of the public wants something, and I have a product that can supply that, but I can't convince the public it's good, how many of you will invest in me? None of you will. 98% of the public tells us they want clean water. I don't know who the 2% are, but there are out there. Anything polls at 98%, right? Nothing polls at 100%. We know how to deliver that. We know how to replumb. We know more about plumbing and ecological function, hydrologic connectivity, and flow, and connections. We know more about this than we ever have in the past. But I can't make the sale. I go to my electorate, and they turn down the bond fund. They turn down the project. I still want you to invest in me. There's something wrong in my business model, right? So how do I start to think about this differently than I have in the past? I know this to be good. You know this to be good. We have to do a better job in understanding the contours of transformation. And I'm putting this in your lap. As practitioners, as political folks, as actors in the system, as passionate investors, I'm asking you to help us understand what transformational value looks like. So when you were a kid and laying on your back in your front yard, looking up at the clouds, thinking about the world that you wanted. When you were in high school and trying to understand the world and the contours of that world, knowing that you could make a difference. Getting up every day and going to work and being passionate like that first day when you showed up. That's what I want you to be. That's who I want you to be. And I believe that you can do that. And I believe in you. And I believe you are the power of transformation. Thank you very much.